Welcome to the Saddle Talk Podcast, where country living meets real talk. Authentic stories, meaningful interviews, and down-to-earth wisdom with a little Southern charm. Saddle up! All right, guys, welcome back to the Saddle Talk Podcast, where we talk about life, health, strength, and what's possible when we look beyond the noise. Today, I am very humbled to have a very special guest who is also a fellow Tuskegee alumni, hey Tuskegee, that has done a lot of amazing things around the world and has a lot of information and is just doing a lot of phenomenal things. Her name is Seneca Dunmore. She is the founder of Dunmore Capital Ventures, and she is a speaker that has spoken in 50 plus countries, which I find is just simply amazing and outstanding. So, without further ado, welcome Seneca, and I mean, everything that you are doing, and I'm just taken away with all of your accomplishments. So tell us about yourself
Thank
and
you.
how'd you get started in all this from biology to connecting people around the world?
Yes, so thank you for having me, Travis. I can't wait. I grew up, born and raised in Houston, Texas, and went to Worthing High School, which was on the southeast side of town. I grew up in a neighborhood called Sunnyside, and Sunnyside was the sixth most dangerous neighborhood in America. It's
Oh
still the
wow.
number one most dangerous neighborhood in Texas. Okay, so just to give you
Oh
an
wow.
idea of where I came from. And so there was a lot of violence, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime. And I knew that if I wanted to be anything in life, I had to get out of Sunnyside, right? And so one thing I'm grateful for is I had some amazing parents who always kind of, you know, allowed us to venture out and see other things. And they always, took us camping and took us to the beach and we do little trips outside of the city. And so it was then that I kind of discovered like, oh, there's more to life than just this little neighborhood of Sunnyside. And so I
Mhm.
got a scholarship to Tuskegee University, and that really just opened up my mind because I was around, you remember, around all these brilliant Black people from all walks of life, people
Right.
from
Yeah.
California, from New York, from Philly, right? We were
That's one
we were
thing I
from
love
all
about
over the place.
Tuskegee, man. Right.
Exactly. We were from all over the place. And I was like, oh my God, I'm around all these brilliant Black people who came from different experiences than mine. And that's when I realized, like, oh, Sunnyside was not a bad neighborhood. Sunnyside was a marginalized and economically disenfranchised community, right? Meaning
Uh-huh.
we were deliberately kept out of the process of creating wealth for ourselves. And we were constantly in survival mode. So I always tell people when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid, right? At the very base
Uh-huh.
level, you have physiological needs, food, water, shelter, right? And then at the top, you have self actualization. Well, you can't talk to somebody about self actualization, right? About the top of the pyramid when they just trying to figure out how they going to eat today. When they're just trying to
Right,
figure out if they're
exactly.
going to have lights tomorrow, if they're trying to figure out if they're going to be
Right.
evicted. And so again, I realized that where I came from was not a bad neighborhood. It was just that we were all in survival mode. And so I was like, okay, I
Right.
got to get out of survival mode. So, went to Tuskegee, graduated with my bachelor's in biology. I thought I wanted to go into medicine, worked
So
for
did
a
I.
little while at Baylor, right? And I realized like, oh, this ain't my thing. I don't want to be attached to a pager all day. I don't want to be on somebody's schedule. So I
Right.
did get into corporate, right? I came back to Houston. I got my master's in information systems. I worked for about 10 years in tech. I worked in New York. I worked in DC. I worked in Houston. And what I realized is that I had the gift of gab and I had the gift of negotiation, right? I knew how to go in here and negotiate these big contracts. And again, this was 20 years ago when I was in tech. So generally, I was the only Black woman in the room. I was the only woman of color. I was the most degreed individual in the room, but I was making the
Hmm.
company all this money and I'm walking home with a
Right.
little old salary, right? And
Yes,
so
I know that
I,
all too well.
okay. And so I ended up walking away from my corporate job in October of 2014, started my motivational speaking business in May of 2015. And by 2016, I was doing my very first international speaking engagement in South Africa.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
off to the races, right? I mean, it just
Yeah.
literally happened that fast. And so I've been doing that for the past 11 years. But during the pandemic is when I started doing more capital ventures because there was the great resignation, right? The great resignation
Uh-huh.
happening where you had all these people of color leaving corporate spaces and now wanting to try their hand at entrepreneurship. But everybody kept
Right.
on running into the same problem, which was access to capital.
Right.
And what I learned was there wasn't a lack of resources, there was a lack of resourcefulness, right? People didn't know who to talk to. They didn't know where to get the resources from. They didn't know what resources were most appropriate for their business. So God gave me this vision of Dunmore Capital
Uh-huh.
Ventures. And then I decided to do my Access Granted Conference to kind of bring it all together where we could basically equip small business owners and entrepreneurs in these marginalized and economically disenfranchised communities with number one, the financial education. Because I don't know about you, Travis, but I didn't go to
Right.
any schools that taught us financial literacy.
Nah, they didn't. Not at all, man. And you
Ex-
bring up something that's
yeah,
very, very, very crucial. Like you said something like, the town that you grew up in. So I'm the kind of the same way. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and even though, I grew up around like a lot of influential people, but I was always when I went to Tuskegee, that's when I had my moment like you did, like, wow, man, it's more to life than just Birmingham, Alabama. I got all these people
absolutely.
from Louisiana, California, from Texas, because everybody had the club, the Texas club, the California
Yeah,
club, the
yeah,
Louisiana club, or whatever. And it became like a big melting pot, like, right there on the campus where I know about California without even have gone to California, but then it makes you want to go there. Same thing like with New York. And then also you hit up on something like, you had to get the gap. I think Tuskegee teaches you how to survive because, the school is in the middle of nowhere. And you really got
yeah.
to make it happen while you are doing your work because we only have one grocery store and we didn't really have a lot of means to a lot of things there. You either
That's
had to go to
right.
Auburn or you had to go to Montgomery. Other than that, you just had to make it happen. And then those people that were like from Texas, I can imagine how hard it was, like, from you going back and forth home all the time. You know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like, you had to make do, you had to learn how to make it work, and you had to, like, work with what you had. And I think that that's kind of like a good building block, and I'm not to take away from any other school, but it's just, I always say Tuskegee is not only the experience, but it's also an experiment too, because you are experimenting on who you are and pushing your levels of like go getting and then it's also the experience of being around that many great creative minds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you had to figure it out on your own, right? Because again, my
Uh-huh.
parents was like, listen, they were, they only had limited funding. So we relied on those
Right.
scholarships. I remember being in that bursar's office and in the financial
Yeah.
aid crying and pleading, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Begging them not to
yeah.
kick me out of school because I told them, I remember telling the bursar, I said, listen, I'm not leaving Tuskegee without my degree. I promised my parents that I wasn't coming home until I had that degree in my hand. So I was
Right.
like, listen, you let me know what I need to do. I don't care if I got to wash your car every weekend, come clean your house, babysit your kids. I was like, I don't care what I have to do, but I ain't leaving Tuskegee. And so,
I actually had to work in a bursar's office in order for a semester because, I said the same thing and that helped me pay for some of my fees at
yeah,
Tuskegee or whatever. I had set out a semester and I was like, well, good. I work here in the bursar's office. I file papers, but I'm like you. I'm not leaving here without my degree. My mom graduated from here. I had uncles that gone here. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going home without this piece of paper saying that I graduated from Tuskegee.
yeah, yeah. And then, just again, being surrounded, like we were fighters at Tuskegee, being surrounded by so
Uh-huh.
many people who were vigilant and who were very serious about their education, right? And so when you're surrounded by
Hmm.
that, you like, I ain't leaving this, and plus I knew
Right.
I was like, I ain't going back to Sunnyside. It was like Tuskegee was, I was just
Yeah.
like, I was having the time of my life. I was surrounded by so many incredible people. You remember Professor Fluker, right? All the,
Yeah, yeah. At Tuskegee, the biology class, like, what, was very hard for me because I had to take that class like two or three times. It was biology 250, 251, and I forget the teacher's name or whatever. But it's like I took that class three times, and her lab I thought was just like really difficult. But the how I endured, it was such a proud moment after I passed it, and then I did my senior seminar, and everything that I had gone through in her class. And when I did my senior seminar, I was like, it was all worth it. My senior seminar, I promoted it, and I told everybody on campus to come. So the biology building was full, packed with my senior seminar.
And then I went first, and then after mine, everybody was getting up and leaving, and everybody was like, "Hey, we got another seminar." So that's when I had like my first spark of speaking. But then, I went to I moved to Illinois and got into real estate, and then got into like
Okay.
fashion, like marketing with Ralph Lauren and all that. And so I kind of put the speaking on like the back burner. But then I started speaking around at like universities and law schools about how to dress and stuff like that. But then when I saw your page and stuff like that, I was like, my God, man, this young lady is speaking all around the world and doing all these phenomenal things or whatever. And I was like, that's an inspiration, and that inspired me like to the nth power. Like, yes, all things are possible, and you are a testimony, and that's what God put people on earth for, to be a testimony. So like, hey, if they can do it, then
Yeah.
maybe I can do something like that. So how did you start
Absolutely.
speaking? Yeah, how did you get to the point where you are speaking around like in different countries and things like that? Because I see a lot of posts of you in like different countries.
Yeah, so okay, so when I was at Tuskegee, I was having some digestive issues like my freshman year. That kind of
Mhm.
came out of nowhere. And so I was losing all of this weight. I was going to all these different gastroenterologists trying to figure out what was wrong, and nobody could make a diagnosis. So I ended up, going home one day. And the doctors, we did a endoscopy, that test where they stick that long scope down your throat. And they saw
Mhm.
that I had a really tight stricture, so they tried to dilate it and it ruptured. So the next thing you know is I'm being rushed
Oh,
into emergency surgery, and I come out of a 3-hour surgery completely blind, right? So my sight didn't return until like 5, 6 days later when they moved me out of ICU into my
seriously?
own room. Yes, so I was blind for a week. I was bleeding internally. They had to fix that, so it was horrible. And so for a long time, I never told that story
What?
because, it was one of those things I was very sensitive about it. And it was traumatic, right? And so every time I had to talk about it, I had to relive it. So when I moved back to Houston, after I left DC, I moved back to Houston and I joined a new church. And one day, the women's ministry director just asked me, she was just like, she was going around the room asking everybody about, what's your story? And so she was like, "Well, Miss Dunmore, tell us about yourself. What is your story?" So I told them, I gave my testimony about me coming through this very traumatic health experience, coming out on the other side of it. And everybody in the room was like, "Oh my God." And so my women's ministry director, she was like, "Oh my God, Seneca, you got to tell more people that story." So I kept being
Mhm.
invited to tell that story, right? I kept being invited to women's conferences and, you know, different functions to tell that story. And it kind of caught fire where I became like this motivational speaker telling this story about overcoming, about how God brought me through this traumatic experience. And that's how I started speaking. It was one of those things I always tell people, my
Mhm.
calling found me, I didn't find it. It was like I was chosen for this
Oh,
journey.
that's pretty cool right there.
Yeah, yeah. It was like I was chosen for this journey. And so God was using me to tell this story, around the world of how I, went from to, and so yeah, so that's how I got into professional speaking.
I never known that. I mean, that is truly a phenomenal story, and that's amazing. So I did an episode with a guy a while ago, and he said that uh sometimes you find well, a lot of times you find your purpose through pain. And I was like, man, that kind of really hit home right there, because it's like when you're going through something or whatever, it's like God is kind of like revealing like the true you and things like that. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I mean, like that is really phenomenal story and things. So, but how did you get hooked up with like the connections you got and like about your and also with your company? Like what do you actually like? For example, as far as your services.
Yes. So Dummer Capital Ventures, we're a capital advisory firm where we connect founders with funders. So most of my time is spent,
Uh-huh.
traveling, meeting these funders. And a lot of times I meet them through LinkedIn. I meet them through personal referrals. And, you know, the beautiful thing is that birds of a feather flock together, right? So
Oh
it's,
yeah.
so it's like, how I find other investors is through investors, right? Because they'll be like, "Oh, Seneca, I enjoyed your conference. It was great speaking at your master class. Well, let me introduce you to John. Let me introduce you to Joseph. Let me introduce." Right. So then they start
Oh, you
introducing me
also
to the
have classes?
yeah. So I do workshops. I do master classes. I do my Access Granted conference. We'll be doing the seventh one here in Houston in April. So yeah, so that's how
Oh
I meet
wow.
these individuals. I get out there, I network, I use social media, I ask for warm introductions, I get referrals. But yeah, that's how I build a business. I always tell people money is a game of relationships. That's what it is.
Yes,
Money is
you're
simply a
absolutely
game of
right.
relationships, right? Because people want to do business with people they
Hmm.
know, like, and trust. And when it comes to money, it's very personal for
Right.
people. So they're wanting to do
Right.
business with the people, around them, who they trust. And so yeah, and so God has just given me this incredible um gift and this great calling to really connect with these high net worth individuals, and to get in these rooms, because what I've learned is that in these spaces they only share certain information within closed door invitation only type rooms. This information is not on Google. You can't
Oh
YouTube it.
wow, really? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's not in a book. It's not on Google. It's not like they only share certain information within their tribes. And that's why they call it tribal knowledge, because if you're not
Uh-huh.
in the tribe, you don't know this information. And that's why a lot of us get left out, because we're not in the right circles, we're not in the right rooms, and so we don't know this
Right,
information.
exactly. So tell me about the first time where with your first speaking engagement where it was overseas and like like a huge audience. Like what was that moment like?
It's amazing because my first speaking engagement was in Darling, South Africa, which is about 45 minutes outside of Cape Town. So we were in South Africa.
Oh
And
wow.
and they have 11 national languages in South Africa. English is one of them, but they speak 10 other languages.
Uh-huh.
And so it was amazing because, here it is, this large audience, and most of the people there speak English, but most of the people there speak like four or five other languages. So, we have translators. And again, like I said, they spoke English, so they knew what I was talking about. But it was amazing. It was different because again, you're in a whole nother country, and in
Right.
front of all these different tribes, because there's so many different tribes within a certain inside certain spaces. But I loved it. I loved every moment of
Uh-huh.
it. The people were so humble. The people were so kind. The information that we were bringing to them really resonated. And so, yeah, it's like every country is different. Every country is so different because, again, different languages, different cultural, norms, different cultural barriers. So yeah, and going in, you have to know those things. So I like to study about the culture and
Oh
their
yeah, I didn't even
traditions
think
and things
about
like.
that. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, yeah, because it's very different everywhere you go. Their traditions and things. So, because again, a lot of times as Americans, we tend to think, America is the standard way of doing, the way we do things is standard,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
I tell people, I'm like, you got to remember,
Right.
America is only 5% of the world population.
But why do you think we're so influential around the world though? Because every time I go somewhere, it's just kind of like people are adopting like American styles, and not that they don't have their own culture and things like that, but they sometimes kind of put it in the back burner. But they do kind of like do like more of Americanized things. I just kind of wonder like, well, why do you think that is?
I mean, it all comes back to branding and marketing, right? How we brand ourselves, how we market ourselves.
Oh, okay,
And
yeah,
yeah, and then
yeah,
this is the land of opportunities. You can come here and create an amazing life for yourself, right? There aren't a
right.
lot of barriers and red tape like you find in other countries. Like in certain countries, you just can't come in and do what you want to do and set up a business and things like that, like you can do here in America. So that's why they call it the land of opportunity, because we have a lot less red tape. It's
Gotcha.
easy to come in here, get the resources that you need. We're a very capitalistic society, which means money talks, right? So if you got the resources, if you
Are
got
you
the
right about
money,
that?
it's pretty easy to navigate versus it's not like that in other countries. So that's why I think, we've been the superpower that we have been. I don't know about now because, with the current administration, we ain't,
Yeah.
you know, we're not
Yeah.
perceived that way so much in the world now, which is really unfortunate. But still, but that's
Right.
that's kind of how we've been able to get by as this superpower for so long.
So what's some of the biggest obstacles that you face, like, breaking into the business that you do as far as like, getting speaking engagements?
Well, it's one of those things. Okay, so you have what you call the gatekeepers, right? You have the individuals who they can say
Mhm.
no, but they don't have the authority to say yes. And so I always tell people,
Gotcha.
we're so indoctrinated to believe that we got to start from the bottom and work our way up. And I don't believe that. I
Mhm.
intentionally look for the people at the top. When I'm looking for, when I'm going into different
Oh, wow.
institutions, yeah, and organizations, I don't start at the bottom. I'm not looking for the secretary. I'm not looking for the executive assistant. I'm not looking for the personal assistant. I'm looking for the president of that organization. I'm looking for the CEO. I'm looking for the C suite, right? The CTO, the CIO, the CFO. I'm looking for the people who have authority in that organization. I'm looking for the people who signed the front of the check, not the back,
Uh-huh.
right? Because that's how we get things done. And so
Gotcha.
again,
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of times we're indoctrinated to believe that we got to start from the bottom and work our way up. And I'm like, no, start at the top. Look for the people at the top. I intentionally look for the people at the top. And so that's why, I've been able to break into a lot of these organizations, institutions, and get these meetings and work with these high net worth individuals because I intentionally start at the top. So yeah. And
So
again,
when you first started, like, yes, go ahead.
no,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. So when you first started, you just went straight, like, you know what? I'm gonna start up here. I'm not gonna even go deal with all this. I'm just gonna go straight to the CEO.
That's it.
And it just more of like repetition and repetition and repetition? Because I know you probably had a couple of no's or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But what kept you going, and what kept you motivated to keep you on that course or on the mission, knowing that your mission was greater than this person turning you down?
Yeah, well, I always tell people you got to understand your why. Like, you know how they say if your why don't make you cry, right? Your why has to
Yeah.
be that powerful where it keeps you going. And so for me, I always tell people you only need one yes. When I got the
Right.
funding from JP Morgan Chase Bank to host my very first conference. Now, what most people didn't see was they didn't see the other 50 banks that slammed the door in my face, right? All they saw was, oh my God, the number
Gotcha.
one bank in the
Yeah.
United States is sponsoring this girl's events. Now that I've got the attention of the number one bank in the United States, guess what? Now I got everybody else's attention because everybody wants to be associated with the winner, right? Everybody wants to be associated with number one. So they're like, oh, wait a minute. If JP Morgan took a bet on her, right? And they're the largest bank in the United States. Oh, well, maybe we should get involved, right? So then you know how like people bandwagon, right? They want to get involved once they see other people getting
Right.
involved. Most people, they don't want to be the first to
Yeah.
take a
Yeah. It's like the
chance.
the little hen story.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, so then I had everybody's attention because it's like, oh, if JP Morgan was willing to take a chance on her, then she must be somebody worth investing in. So, yeah. But again, I always tell people it only
Mhm.
takes one. It only takes one person to believe in you. It only takes one yes. It only takes one door being open. And then you keep working it from there. But I always tell people don't get discouraged because no is just a part of the process. It's just part of the course.
Right.
So
And sometimes you can get a little nervous, man. Like I know sometimes, when I'm like when I started this platform, I'm not gonna even I was a little nervous at first or whatever, but I was like, you know what? It is what it is. It's either now or never. And then I referenced the hen story because like when the hen was making the bread and nobody wanted to help the hen, like, make the bread, but when it was done, everybody wanted a piece or whatever. And I was just kind of like, but the hen, no, every time someone said no, it didn't matter. The hen kept was like, okay, I need to bake this bread. I need to add this ingredient, add this ingredient, add this ingredient, and things like that. So it's like sometimes it's like getting over that fear. And in the Bible, God does not give you the spirit of fear, but a peace, love, and a sound mind.
that's
And
right.
sometimes that fear is really kind of blocking your success and your obstacle because you're listening to your mind. Because sometimes, I know at least for me, sometimes it's just me, my thoughts, and God. And, it's like, sometimes it's you versus you, and it's a mental battle on the inside. You got one part of you saying, like, yeah, we want to be here, we want to be there. Then the other part of you is like, ah, man, this ain't going to work. What if they say no? What if this happens or what if that happens? But you have to stay the course and you have to stay the mission. And I always like to hear, like, individuals' story or how they persevered through all the no's and through all of the adversities and all the obstacles because you never know who you can inspire. You know what I mean? It's just
Absolutely.
like, yeah. If like for you, for instance, you probably never thought that like, okay, Travis is looking and he's getting inspiration, you know what I mean? Because there's been a lot of times where I'm like, these people are probably not gonna be interested in what I'm talking about. But yeah, you're right. They might not be, but there's somebody who probably is. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, it's just one of those things where you have to stay the course and know that you are here for a purpose, and that what you have to offer the world is very meaningful. It might not be meaningful for everyone, but it's like all you gotta do, like you said, is just one. Teach one, and then that'll start building. It'll be like a snowball effect.
Absolutely. And then we just have to reframe how we think about failure. Failure is just a
Hmm.
learning opportunity, right? So I always tell people, people like
Hmm.
Warren Buffett, he won't invest in a company that has not had a major failure. He's actually looking for
Oh
people
wow.
who have had a major failure because what does that tell him? If they've been able to bounce back and get back up again and keep on veering, right, keep on moving forward, it's like, oh, okay, well, they've got the stick to itiveness, they've got the grit, they've got the drive to keep on going, even in the face of adversity. That's the type
Oh.
of person I want to bet on. That's the type of person I want to put my money towards because again, I don't want to bet on someone who the first time life, punches them in the face and they down and out, and they don't know how to get back up again, then guess what? When something else happens, right, they don't know how to recover from that.
Mm.
So I want someone who's got a couple of kinks in their armor, right? Who has been in the
Yeah.
trenches and they know how to fight. They know how to, because again, it exercises your critical thinking. It exercises and shows you how to um you know, work your way out of situations, how to troubleshoot and all of that. Like that's actually a good thing. So I always tell people we just have to reframe how we think about failure because failure is not a bad thing. And I don't know any successful organization, I don't know any person who has had massive success in their life without massive failure as well.
And you know what? We don't really see that. A lot of times people see it. Well, majority of the time people see the end result and thinking like all you got to do is do this and then you'll be here. But then you don't see all of the scribble scrabble that they went through in order to get there. You know what I mean?
That's
And I
right.
think that's why everybody's story is important, because we have this illusion. When we're looking at TV or when we're looking at social media and see somebody like successful or perceived success,
Hmm.
but you don't know all of the long hours, all of the nights they probably was in the middle of the living room crying, wondering like how they was going to get through, or maybe they were eating canned tuna at night. Maybe
Yeah.
you might see them on a boat eating steak, but like 2 years ago they probably was in a living room, eating canned tuna and Kool-Aid, trying to figure out like how they was going to pay their bills. But they stayed the course and they stayed on task. And that kind of relates to me, like when I hear all these stories, like the book of Job. He had everything, and then all of a sudden everything collapsed.
Taken away
And
from them.
so he still, yeah, exactly. And he still kept his faith. He still persevered. And then he ended up getting blessed 10 times fold. And through this venture and through like a lot of my business ventures, I always refer back to the book of Job. I read that all the time. I like Proverbs too, but I really fell in love with the book of Job because it really shows like when you go through adversities, like, either you're going to like sit there, complain, whine about it and cry, or you're going to change your situation and still have faith and still believe in your mission and still continue. And then, you eventually you'll be rewarded like 10 times fold because you've been
Absolutely.
battle tested, as you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's just, it's all a part of life. It's all a part of life. And we just have to embrace it. And we have to be okay with that and understand that, if you're a believer, understand that it's all working out for your good, right? No, it might not feel good, it might not
Hmm.
look good, but it's all working out together for your good. There's times that I've
Right.
looked back and I'm like, oh man, I see now, you know, why this happened. I
Right.
see now, right? So you might see things later, like you don't understand it then, but God will, eventually start to reveal things, yeah, and you just have to stay the course.
So what are some of your memorable speaking engagements, and like what do you usually talk about? Is it just like, variety of things? And yeah, what was one of your most memorable where you were like, "Oh man, I want to come back here and speak again."
Yeah,
Well, I know you
yeah. Well,
probably want to speak at all of them, but you know what I
I
mean?
know,
But
right. Yeah, it's been a variety of different things. Of course, when I first started, I was going around talking about my story, and basically,
mhm.
I was showing people how to, use their greatest obstacle as their greatest opportunity, right? So that was the whole
Uh-huh.
premise and principle behind that. But then, of course, when I got into the funding arena, then it became about, showing people how to leverage social and intellectual capital to secure the financial capital that they needed to grow and scale their business, things like that. So it's changed
Uh-huh.
over the years. But let me see some of my most memorable. Gosh, all of them are so unique and so different. I
Okay.
remember my very first one back in 2015 when I like first started my business, and I
Uh-huh.
was speaking at this women's organization. There were probably about 100, 200 women in the room. I never forget when I got off stage, this young lady named Crystal, she said, "Oh my God, you're such a pint-sized powerhouse." That's how I got that name. So when
Okay.
people when people, wonder why, like, oh, okay, oh, Seneca, the pint-sized powerhouse, that's how I got that name. It literally came from a young lady from my very first speaking engagement. When I walked off stage, she said that and everybody heard her. And so and then she, like maybe a couple of weeks later, she made me a T-shirt that said the pint sized powerhouse. And from then on, that's what I've been known as. So that's probably one of my most memorable times because she kind of branded me without, me even knowing it. And it just stuck from there.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that sometimes you get ideas in places and situations that you never imagined. What are some of the, like your favorite books that you like to read, or what books were like most influential?
Oh gosh, when I tell you I read, like I know I have thousands of books in my library. Like in my parents' garage right
Wow.
now, I have like one wall that's like all my books that they've been storing for me. Um, there's a book by Chris Voss. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's one of the if
Uh-huh.
you're trying to learn how to be a better negotiator, learning how to negotiate your own contracts, your own speaking engagements, things like that. That's one of the best books you could ever read. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Um,
Uh-huh.
gosh, there's so many books that I love to read. Um, Alan Wise, he's one of my favorite authors. He does a lot of books around proposals, like if you want to learn how to write proposals and things like that. There's one he has $1 million proposals, $1 million this. So yeah, Chris Wise, Alan Wise, Chris Voss. I love Ta-Nehisi
Uh-huh.
Coates. When I want, to kind of poke the bear a little bit, I love reading his books. Donald Miller, I love reading Donald Miller, Story Brand. I always tell people how to build your story brand, meaning how to brand yourself, how to tell your story and stuff like that. He's one of the best authors for that, Donald Miller. The 80/20 rule, right? So showing people how, you know, 80% of what you do
Oh
in your
wow.
business is not really helping you reach the goal. Is literally like the 20%, and you need to find what is that 20% that you do well that's helping you
Oh,
reach
that's
the
pretty
goal. So
interesting.
yeah, I could go on and on when it comes to books. People ask me for my book recommendations all the time, and I send them lists like, hey, if you want to know about this, read these books. If you want to know about this, if you want to know about this. But yeah, I have a library full of books. So if you want me to share that list, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, well, I can tell you're very well read just by hearing you speak. Like, my mother has a PhD in English and rhetoric, and she has a house. Her whole house is like a library. It's like, I can go in her house and I can grab a book, and she'll be like, "Oh yeah, that book is about such and such, such and such," and I'm like, "It's way over here in
Absolutely.
the corner. How'd you know about that?" You know what I mean? And like, she like, has written like books and poetry and things like that, and then she does a little bit of public speaking. And so that's why I was like, oh, I can tell she's very well read. So I'm just kind of
Well, yeah.
curious of like, what books that you have read. So tell me about like some of your workshops that you host and you do. I know you do like a lot of women workshops. Do you do like couples or men workshops, or
Yeah. Well,
yeah?
this
What
is
what
the
are your
thing.
workshops?
It's funny you even said that because most people think I only cater towards women, and I'm like, no, most of my book of business is actually men because I deal in the funding space,
Oh, okay,
which is heavily male dominated. I think just because of my femininity
okay.
and my nature that people think I gravitate and do more things for women, and that's actually not the truth. My business is towards small business owners and entrepreneurs, individuals who are looking for capital. So that can be anybody, black, white,
Mhm.
tall, short, skinny, it don't matter, right? If you're looking for capital,
Right.
if you're trying to scale your business, if then I'm the girl you want to see. But yeah, most of the people who come to me are, men as well. So like most of my conferences
Mhm.
are probably like 60, 70% men. Um, and
Mhm.
especially my master classes, because my master classes are the more high level, where we're really masterminding and sitting with those investors, and we're having dinner, and we're deal structuring and all of that type of stuff. And so yeah, most of those are men. But yeah, so men and women are invited. But yeah, so I do my
Oh, okay.
Access Granted conference, like I said, which is a conference that my team and I designed to equip marginalized and economically disenfranchised communities with financial education, the capacity building tools, and more importantly, the funding resources that they need to grow, scale, and sustain their business. And like I said, my master class
Mhm.
is more for like the established business owners who are making a certain, amount of money. They're cash flowing. They're getting a lot of
Uh,
traction. They have a scalable business, meaning the business can run without them. They've got systems and automation and structure in place that if they wanted to go take, a vacation in Italy for 30 days, the business is still running, right? It doesn't require them being there. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, we look for a lot of those type of businesses, which are scalable businesses, because I always tell people growth and scale are two different things. You might have a business that's growing, but it's not necessarily scalable. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we do.
Yeah, no, that's a very I mean, that's actually helpful to me. Like you might have something that's growing and it's not scaling. So I guess it's really just fine tuning how to how to scale. You're right because I know a couple of people that have businesses, but it's not really like scaling on the level that I know that they would like it to scale and things like that. So it's probably just
Yeah,
about them fine tuning and things like I didn't know that your company offered all of that. At first I was just thinking like I know she speaks a lot and she networks. So is it more like motivational? But it's more connecting. But you do a variety of things, and then you have a team. So that says a lot right there. So you have a lot of different pieces in movement to elevate everyone and
yeah,
things like that. So that's pretty cool. I'm
thank
like,
you.
and I'm also thinking like, yeah, maybe we need to host a event here in Nashville, or something like that. And connect to do something like that because like I have a circle of influence down here as far as like part of it is my fraternity and then a lot of it is of people who like I've met along the way. So I think that would be like something that we can collaborate on in the future
Absolutely.
and like maybe like host something down here. So how what once again what events do you have coming up and then how can people like get in touch with you and also like the products that you provide.
Yeah, yeah. So, my next Access Granted conference, we're looking to host that at the end of April. I'm in talks with Texas Southern University right now at their Jesse H. Jones School of Business because we would love to host it at the business school. The
Mhm.
last two that we hosted here were at the Hilton Americas, which is one of my favorite hotels, and then the Marriott Marquis. But this year we want to actually do it at the college. So we'll start pushing out information about that on next week. But yeah, so that's the next event that we have coming up. Following that, we'll be doing a master class. I'm not sure where we're going to host that one just yet. One of the investors that I work with, he's opened up his mansion in California, so he was saying we were welcome to do
Oh
it there.
wow.
Yeah, so we might host it there. But yeah, we've got some things coming up. But I always tell people, I'm easy to find on social media. I go by my name on everything Seneca Dunmore, so you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Substack and all these other, TikTok. And my name, I use my name for everything. So I don't have any other fancy alias names and things like that. You can find me, all my platforms are open. And then if you just want to learn more about, how to interact with these high net worth individuals, how to get in these rooms, how to cultivate the right relationships, how to access the right resources, I have a school community called Insider Access, right? And that basically is showing individuals how to go from outsiders to insiders. And that membership is $25 a month, but it gives you all the information you need to, how do I
Oh
write
really?
these letters? How do I send the proposals? How do I get sponsorship? How do I get in the right rooms? How do I cultivate these relationships? Yeah. And so that membership is is only $25 a month. And again, there's other individuals in there. So we're sharing information. Um, and what it really does is it helps you to kind of expedite things. It really helps you to distill all that information so that you can execute quickly. Because I always tell people the most valuable resource that we have right now is time. Right? That is the most valuable
Hmm.
commodity that you have. You can always get more money, but you only have a limited amount of time. So, one of the things I always
Right.
encourage people is that you need to learn how to leverage social and intellectual capital. Social capital is just all about who you know and who knows you. The intellectual capital is all about what they know. You don't need to know everything. You just need to be in the rooms, right, with the individuals who know more than you. So then now you can leverage their knowledge. You can now leverage their expertise, their resources. And that's how you move things much quicker. That's how these high net worth individuals are able to do these deals and move things along because they don't rely on just themselves. A lot of times in our communities, we're taught to believe that we got to hustle and grind. We got to get out of the mud. We got to do it by ourselves. And that's when it comes to scaling, when it comes to
Right.
really growing, your platform, your business, your brand, it's all about collaboration. At the bottom, it's about competition. At the top, it's about collaboration.
Wow, that is a really big takeaway right there. At the bottom, it's about competition. At the top, it's about collaboration because they've all made it. So it's just like they don't need to compete. They're just trying to grow and get better. At
Absolutely.
the bottom, I guess, right, they're trying to get the lights on or whatever. So it's just kind of like, survival of the fittest. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
So that is a very interesting takeaway. I never even really thought about it like that. So, I'm definitely going to have you back on, probably like a part two, because I feel like, a lot of your information is very valuable. And so the $25 a month membership, what is that called again? Because
It's
I
called
feel like I
Insider.
need to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's called Insider Access, and I'll send you the link. But yeah, it's called Insider Access. And I
Okay.
always tell people,
Insider
the
access. All right.
yeah, because this is the thing. The top 1%, they know something that most of us don't know, right? And what we don't know is costing us money we don't have and
Hmm.
time we can't afford to lose. So you want to get into those, you got to get on the inside,
Right.
right, to know this information.
That's what's up. Well, I appreciate you, Seneca, for coming on today. And I
My
know you
pleasure.
are a very busy young lady that has a lot of things going on. And I am humbled that you took time out of your busy schedule to sit here with me and impart your knowledge and wisdom. It is much appreciated. So,
Thank
once
you.
again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Seneca Dunmore. She is the founder of Dunmore Capital Ventures, and she's also a speaker. So, if you need to get in touch with her, it's Seneca Dunmore at Gmail, right?
Yes, Seneca.Dunmore@gmail.
Seneca.Dunmore at gmail.com. And there you can find all the information that you need to help grow and scale your business. So, Seneca, I'm once again appreciative. And like I always like to leave, keep it country, keep it cowboy, and God bless America. Thank you for coming on.
Amen. Thank you, Travis.